Welcome back.
Welcome back, family, to Hear Us Out. I am Renee,
I'm Curry.
and I want to say once again, as always, thank you to our longtime subscribers and to our new listeners who are here. Make sure that you hit subscribe to Hear Us Out.
Thank you.
And this is going to be our last episode on
hmm
Dune Messiah, and this is our last episode of 2021,
Yeah.
actually.
hmm
And so I just want to say that it's been a joy to read, even though I know that you would normally say this at the end, but
hmm
I just need to say it now that it's really been refreshing, actually, these
hmm
last 4 to 5 weeks that we have been reading Dune Messiah. And maybe the last part was just so touching. I almost shed a tear.
Me too. I
For,
always, every time I get to the end of this book, I always get a bit misty eyed.
yeah, I felt, I'm like, man,
Yeah.
this is it. And
hmm
well, it's it's the end, but it's a new beginning. It's going to be another
It's the
beginning.
end, but it's not over yet.
Yes, good way
Yeah.
to put it. And so I want to say, once again, thank you for even introducing me to Frank Herbert, and it's been like I said, it's been refreshing actually to read him the first time we read
hmm
him, and reading him again. It's been even, I'll say, a little bit uplifting, even though
hmm
it ends the way that
Yeah. I
it
mean, like you said,
does.
it is a tragic story.
Yeah.
It's a victory
Uh
couch for
huh.
tragedy. But like I said in the preamble, is that anytime, like I always end up revisiting Doom
Hmm.
anytime I start to get like just so frustrated that I
Yeah.
can't take it.
Hmm.
I just need to like recenter myself and
Right.
just to know that there's some sense in the world.
Hmm.
I always turn to Doom when that happens.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I just wanted to make that known once again, and
hmm
like I said, thank you for even challenging me, in where I was, because like I said many times over the years that I knew that there was another step,
hmm
but I just didn't. I guess in all of my knowings and readings and studies, it always seemed to stop, at a place where, but I always knew that there was something else.
hmm
And for it to arrive and to come in this particular story has been, at first it was almost a little mind blowing that for me, because
hmm
I didn't, I guess I wasn't, looking for it or whatever,
Yeah.
but when I read it the first time, I'm like, see, this is what
hmm
that was. It filled that void that I knew was answered. I just didn't know that it was answered. What that the answer came in this particular form
hmm
in his book, and so
So
that's where we are.
yeah. So let's do a quick
Hmm.
overview
Yeah.
of the final part that we read.
Hmm.
It started with Bijaz,
The
the
dwarf.
dwarf,
Hmm.
who Paul received, I
Right.
guess you could say he
Yeah.
received
Hmm.
before he was blinded by the Bene and
Hmm.
their machinations and all.
Right.
And Bijaz is being interrogated by Hate,
Right.
the Duncan Idaho
Right.
killer,
Hyatt.
and they're going back and forth, and uh, throughout this interrogation, it takes on another element
Yes.
where Hate realized that Bijaz isn't here for Paul, he
Hmm.
isn't here for Aaliyah, that
Right.
Bijaz is here for him.
Him. Correct.
And then Bijaz is able to, you can say, hypnotize
Right.
Hate and put
Hmm.
a compulsion in him,
Hmm.
so that will make Hate kill
Right.
Paul,
Paul. Right.
and then Hate infects him with this compulsion, then wipes his mind,
Hmm.
and so Hate has no idea what has just happened to him,
Hmm.
but he knows that when Paul says a trigger, he's
Right.
going to say a trigger phrase.
Hmm. She is
Is
gone, I think, is the
Yeah,
trigger phrase. Right.
he's going to say this trigger phrase, and that's when it's going to unlock this
Right.
compulsion within hate
Right.
to kill Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And and then the chapter after that is
Mm-hmm.
when Aaliyah takes a massive dose of spice,
Right.
trying to pierce the veil, trying to see what Paul has seen, trying to
Mm-hmm.
understand why he's choosing
Right.
this particular path he's on, and she takes a dangerous
Yeah,
amount
mom. Mm-hmm. All right.
of spice,
Mm-hmm.
and she ends up with hate. A lot of all of
The
the
last.
last
Mm-hmm.
chapters are very hate heavy,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a reason for that we're
Right.
going to go into.
Mm-hmm.
But she ends up with with hate, and hate's kind of there to talk her through this giant spice
Mm-hmm.
overdose that she's going through, and this vision that she's having, and through that, Aaliyah is able to get some idea
Mm-hmm.
of what Paul is doing. She's able to see the role that Paul's playing in all of this, but she still can't see why.
Right.
Why is he choosing this
That's
path?
right. Mm-hmm.
And Hate is there. Hate calls the doctor in and try to
Mm-hmm.
pump her stomach
Mm-hmm.
because it's like she would die.
Right.
She would be taken by the vision. So yeah, and and after that is
Mm-hmm.
when we get Chani.
Right.
Chani is at Siege to Burn,
Mm-hmm.
and Chani's there with this massive contingent that because Hate's there, and Leah, and Gaius Helmahane is
Yeah.
there, and
Ireland, the whole,
BJ
yeah, I
is
think
there,
it's everybody, yeah, the
Irulan,
whole crew
everybody is there.
there.
Not to mention like all the the bells and
This was
whistles
right.
and all the
Mm-hmm.
the supplicants and
Right.
court jesters and all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff who follow Paul everywhere.
Right.
They're at Siege to Burr,
Mm-hmm.
and Chani is there, and she's having contractions,
Right.
but not not the type of contractions that let you know that the baby's coming,
Right.
but just to let you know the type of contractions that you have before you have the contractions, so
Right.
that you know that the baby's coming. So
Yeah.
she's still able to walk around,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
stuff, but she's
Mm-hmm.
having contractions,
Mm-hmm.
and she's at Siege to Burn. She's just thinking to herself about you know everything that has happened
Mm-hmm.
to Ericus, everything that's happened to Dune, and why she doesn't feel comforted at Siege.
Mm-hmm.
This was her home. This is where
Right.
she was raised,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no comfort here. And hate
Because Paul is not there.
Paul. Well,
Well,
he
he's
is there,
there, but
but then
he's
he ends
not
up leaving.
right.
He's not around for the
As
actual
a
birth.
birth,
He ends up
right.
leaving
Mm-hmm.
because there's
Right. Well, yeah.
yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we and Chani's there. She's thinking to herself about everything that has happened to Ericus and how once again she has the feeling that they were better off. Like I said, this is one of those. It was one of the rare stories where water and greenery and life is
Mm-hmm.
seen as a poison.
Mm-hmm.
There's a degradation that comes with, especially to the old
Freeman,
human ways.
right. Mm-hmm.
And she thought they were better off when they were in the desert. They
Mm-hmm.
were better off when they were on the run from the Harkonnens.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of the things like the Freemen aren't the Freemen
Right.
anymore. They're unrecognizable.
Mm-hmm.
And Hate comes out, and Hate is able to to talk her back into Siege to Birth to get to go lay down because
Right.
she's having contractions,
Right.
but she's not showing it. She's
Right.
biting her teeth,
Right.
digging her nails in, not
Uh-huh.
really showing it. But once Hate is able to talk her back into it and calls the
Mm-hmm.
medics and stuff like that. And Hate also has this compulsion that we're seeing throughout the Aaliyah,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Aaliyah and this chapter, that he starts to feel a panic
Right.
every time a female of the
Atreides line, yeah.
house
Mm-hmm.
is in danger.
Right.
Like when Aaliyah was going, like he was just thinking, I can't let her die. I can't let her die.
Right.
I can't let her die. And the same thing he's thinking with Chani here.
Mm-hmm.
He's wondering, why am I having this panic?
Right.
And instead of doing what most people would do, which is just try to ignore it or just, move on and try
Right.
to just get on with it, he allows himself to feel
yeah.
the panic. He
Mm-hmm.
sits in it.
Mm-hmm.
He analyzes it. And that's when he's able to realize that a compulsion has been put on him.
Mm-hmm.
Something has been put on him.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the next chapter is where we see Paul.
Right.
Paul is back at his citadel,
Mm-hmm.
signing treaties, making sure everything is in line because he knows there's not too much longer to go.
Right.
but really he's there because he can't bear
Right.
being by Chani's side
Mm-hmm.
and because he like we know Chani is not going to survive
Right.
this, and Chani at the very end is able to realize
Mm-hmm.
that maybe this isn't that she's not going to survive it,
Right.
and Paul is just trying to distract himself with
Mm-hmm.
all this other stuff because he can't bear it, and but then hate
Yeah.
comes in,
Mm-hmm.
hate in the intervening time
Right.
travels back to the Citadel to go and meet with Paul because he needs to tell him that he had a compulsion has been put on him.
Mm-hmm.
That something has happened to him. And but Paul he's far away at
Yeah.
the moment,
Yeah.
and he hears a whisper in the
Mm-hmm.
wind.
Mm-hmm.
He hears Chani call for him,
Right.
and he hears her die,
Mm-hmm.
and he knows it. He knows it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just like it's too.
It's too
I can't
much.
say
Right.
it's too much for because he's still because like he still knows like this. I can't. He wants to grieve. He wants
Wants
to
to right.
cry. He wants to have this, but he can't because there's still something that needs to be done,
Done. Mm-hmm.
which is the same thing that Paul experienced
Mm-hmm.
in the first Dune when his father died.
Right.
And he was in the desert with Jessica, and he couldn't cry, he
Right. I'm
couldn't
about to say
grieve.
he doesn't have the luxury
Not
of
until,
grieving.
yeah,
Right. Mm-hmm.
not until he plays it out. Not
Mm-hmm.
until he gives the message to Jessica,
Right.
and not until he has his first vision. That's when
Mm-hmm.
he's able to grieve. So he's caught. He's blind, so he's
Yes.
fully caught up in his vision,
Visions. Right. Mm-hmm.
and so he knows that there's still something else that he needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
And but he says the words. He says, "She's gone.
Mm-hmm.
She's gone," and that's what summons this compulsion
Right.
in hate.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes to try to stab.
Stab. Right. Paul.
But he's even
But he's
stopping.
fighting.
He's
Right. He's
fighting it.
fighting that. Right.
And for a moment there, Duncan Idaho comes out and he
Right.
tells Paul, "Run,
Run.
your
Right.
ass."
Uh-huh.
And but
Paul is
Paul
like
refuses to
to
run.
run.
Like,
Right.
no, I'm not running.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever is going to come, we're going to deal with it at
Mm-hmm.
this pace with grace. I think he
Right.
says, you know. But and he says something
That activates
that
the
he
Duncan
says
Idaho.
something
Right.
that his grandfather would say.
Right.
And then Duncan knows his grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember back when in the first time
Mm-hmm.
Aaliyah and Hate gets them a long time when they
Right.
are investigating Lichner's body in the desert, it was Paul's grandfather's shrine.
Mm-hmm.
The shrine to no, it was a shrine to his father.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also just the story of his grandfather. All of that really played into having this semi awakening for Hate at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But in this part, it was something that Paul says, and reminds Hate of Paul's grandfather
Mm-hmm.
that is able to, that's something that allows him to become Duncan Idaho.
Right.
It awakens all of his
right.
old memories.
Mm-hmm.
And he remembers being Hate. He has all the memories
Mm-hmm.
of Hate, but it's the Duncan Idaho personality that has been awoken
Mm-hmm.
in him. Right. And so he's able to resist and awaken, and he's Duncan Idaho, and he doesn't try to kill Paul.
Right.
Duncan's back.
Right.
Right. So Hate's gone, Duncan's
right.
back.
But the dwarf, doesn't he see this and he recognizes that?
Yeah, that's later on.
Okay, okay.
So yeah, it's just a long chapter.
Right.
Yeah. So so during that, Paul recognizes that and says, okay, but immediately Duncan has to get in line as well because the vision isn't over.
Right.
There's still things for him to do, and I think it's during that time where he figures out that he's having twins.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He's like, what? And it's because everybody just assumed that he knew because Paul knows everything.
Right.
Right? Everyone assumed that he knew. Chani assumed, all the doctors. Nobody told him that he was having twins.
Right.
All Paul knew, he thought he was just having a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the vision showed him. Right? But now he's having twins. He's having two children, a daughter and a son.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of taken back by this, but he knows. But everything else is still matching up.
Right.
Every time there's been a little chink
right
in the vision.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't see Bajaz. He didn't see, but everything else always like his vision is inexorable. Nothing can wrench him away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. So he still, is playing this out, and he goes to see Stabur, and he just wants to see Chani's body, but his vision is starting to go.
Right.
He's starting to come to that last
Mm-hmm.
moment where everything is starting to fade away. And he's starting to actually be blind. He can't see. And Hara, who's Stilgar's wife,
Right.
is there. He's like, you really can't see anymore. But
Mm-hmm.
he's just like, just take me to Chani.
Right.
He goes to see Chani, and that's when Aaliyah comes in
Mm-hmm.
with Lickna, who's actually Sidetail,
Right. Sidetail.
as we've established. And Sidetail comes in, and he, is like, is that Hate or is that Duncan Idaho?
Right.
Because Hate's awakening was a part of their plan.
Right.
Because what they really want to do is tempt Paul into showing Paul that, a person can be reawakened to their
Mm-hmm.
old memories. Show them that that's
Right.
a thing. And then tempt Paul with Chani.
Chani. Right.
And we could bring Chani back for
Mm-hmm.
you. You could reawaken her and all that stuff. But he can't do it because
Right.
and to do that would to, give in to the Benny Tylax.
Yeah.
And, to,
And then you're under
unleash-
their thumb,
yeah,
whatever.
under that
Right.
thumb. He's like, no. But during this, Sidetail takes out a knife.
Right. And holds
And
it over the
he's
baby. It's
threatening the children.
right.
You
And
know,
of course he thinks, because Paul is
Paul is
blind.
actually blind at this
Right.
moment.
Mm-hmm.
And Sidetail is a master assassin.
Right.
And him just being threatened. If anybody makes a move,
right.
the children are dead. Right? So now, Sidetail is talking with Aaliyah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to negotiate and stuff like that. But during this, Paul is starting to see.
Right.
Paul is like, what in the world? But he's not seeing through his eyes.
That's right.
Because he doesn't have
Right.
eyes. He's starting to see through his son's eyes.
Right.
Through the baby Leto's eyes.
Right.
And he sees
the
himself
Yep.
like
right.
curled up in the corner.
Right.
And he sees Sidetail
Right.
standing over his child and stuff
Right.
like that. And he said, this was not a part of the vision.
Right.
But and he's able to, through his son's eyes,
Mm-hmm.
he's able to, he does this internal calculus.
Right.
And he throws his cries knife. Like the greatest, this is like
because the way that
he has to, because if this doesn't work out,
right,
then that's it.
Right.
For his children, that's
Mm-hmm.
it for everything. And this is why Paul did everything. It's why he sacrificed China. It's why he did all this stuff.
Right.
He sacrificed his vision to save the future, literally save his children. And he is able to, just like it's a callback. It's a callback to when Aaliyah was having her sword fight with the dummy, and Paul is able to throw his knife,
right,
in the
precision.
He has to do it one more time,
right,
and he does it.
And he hits Scott
right in his eye,
right,
and just slumps over dead.
He lands on it, right.
Yeah, just throws his cries knife right into his face,
right,
and that's it. I mean, he could have scathed him, and the poison would have killed him,
right.
But
he
got him right in the head,
right,
yeah,
right.
And Paul and Hara and Aaliyah are all there, and they're all surprised by it.
Yes.
And Duncan is like, was that a part of your vision?
Right.
What was that? And he's like, no. That wasn't part of it. So even then, Paul was so like upset that the universe couldn't surprise him. And in his closing moments, in his finest moments, he gets a surprise from his son.
Mm-hmm.
And his children have been preborn.
Right.
And it's because of all the spice that Chani had to take because of the contraceptives, and there was all these troubles with the pregnancy that she had to just keep consuming the spice just to survive up to this point. But that's what, and his children are preborn, and they're speaking to him from his future, from like they have this psychic connection, and they're speaking to him from his memories because they're him at this point. They have all his memories, and they have all his false memories, and they're speaking from that line in his very head. So Paul is like, so he's completely going at this moment.
And he names his son Leto, right? That's after his dad.
After his father. After his father and his grandfather. So this is the third Leto of their Atreides
And
line.
he names his daughter Ganima.
Yes.
And Stilgar's wife is like, at first she opposes the name.
Yeah.
And I don't remember why, but I know that
Yeah, because
there's
Ganima literally, I think it means like spoil of war.
yeah, that's it exactly right,
That's what
right,
her name
right,
means, and the
right,
name in and of itself is kind of an ill omen.
right.
But since Paul didn't know
That's right.
that he was having a
Since
son, he
right.
only thought that he was having a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and since Paul didn't know, and it was Leto that was talking to him
Right.
in his mind. Because Ganima, she can't have. She literally, females are incapable of having access to the male
Right.
line.
Mm-hmm.
But she has all the females.
Mm-hmm.
But Leto has
Mm-hmm.
he has the
Yeah.
Quizataract,
Yeah.
so
He
he has
already
the
you're
males
right.
and the
Mm-hmm.
females. So he knows that that it ends that Ganima
Right.
is the extra. That it
Right.
was Leto the entire time
Mm-hmm.
that was going to guide the most.
Right.
So Ganima is the spoil of
The
war.
war.
It's his
Right.
treasure,
Mm-hmm.
right, that he was able to get.
And so that's the
And
name.
yeah,
Right.
so that's their
Mm-hmm.
names. And he goes back to Siege the Bird, and now that he's finally blind, he
Mm-hmm.
knows that this is where it ends for
Right.
him. He goes back to Siege the Bird, and not I mean he goes back to his citadel,
Mm-hmm.
and I think at the very end it says that his vision has been shattered.
Right. There's
Paul
nothing left. Right.
finally wins.
Right.
His vision was the one that locked us down to the jihad and all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but he finally is able to shatter it all, and the universe, the Imperium, is free.
Right.
It is free once again.
And
And
so
at,
he
and at the
walks out.
very
Mm-hmm.
end, he walks out into the desert.
Desert.
He the ultimate freedom right. He's blind,
Right.
and he goes into the desert, and he says his final words is, "Now I am free."
Right. And that's gonna
Finally, it's
take
over.
on. And now, I mean,
But we know where the story goes in the next
right.
book and stuff like that.
Right.
But Aaliyah is Queen Regent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's regent, just waiting for the children to mature, and they'll take the
Right.
throne. And Aaliyah has ordered the execution
Right.
of everyone
Yeah.
involved.
Right. Right.
So Edric has been killed, and the Reverend Mother guy, Helen Haim, has been killed.
Oh, y'all.
Even though Paul said
Right.
not to kill them, but still God still
Yeah.
still God
Right.
still kills them.
Right.
And
Oh, y'all
which is a
have to go.
callback to when
Right.
Aaliyah was like, "You're going to disobey my brother,"
Brother.
and this
Right.
is it.
Yeah, that's right.
She orders the execution, and he
Right.
goes through it all
Yeah. Right.
because
Hey.
yeah, they won, but they still mad.
Right.
Paul had
Right.
but Paul he
And
like the
that's going
Benny
to create
Tylax,
right, but that creates like a whole nother
yeah.
myth within itself. Of
But the Benny
you know
Tylax have been
completely
completely
yeah
like
yeah.
disenfranchised for their role in this.
Mm-hmm.
The Quizerat has been shook
Yep.
by the executions of Corba and the role that they played
Mm-hmm.
in it, and the Reverend Mothers. Paul beat them all.
Yep.
He beat them all.
Mm-hmm.
He beat the Quizerat. He beat himself. He
Right.
beat them all,
Mm-hmm.
and he safeguarded the future of his children. He safeguarded the future
Mm-hmm.
in and of itself. He freed it from his vision.
Mm-hmm.
He did all these things, and at the end, the book ends with Duncan Idaho comforting Aaliyah
Right.
and feeling completely now that he's Duncan Idaho
Mm-hmm.
again. He realizes that he doesn't know any of these people anymore.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And there's a solemn aura
Uh-huh.
of him, but he's still there to comfort Aaliyah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the story ends.
Right. Because even Stilgar, I think Stilgar was like,
Look,
"Look, can
Aaliyah is
you
on.
right? Aaliyah needs right,
Aaliyah is she's
right,
trapped between like mourning her brother and
right,
raging at him
right.
for doing
Yeah, for
this.
doing this right.
So all this stuff, and I love it because Paul is like at the end, he's like, "It's your turn, Aaliyah.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
out.
Mm-hmm.
It's over for me. Y'all
Mm-hmm.
y'all take it from here."
Right.
But yeah,
So.
so that's how it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think a glorious end.
I mean,
glorious in that
it's tragic.
it's tragic.
But it's victorious.
Mm-hmm.
In the first Dune, Paul is lamenting all of this. He doesn't
Right.
want this. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want genocide. He doesn't want this to be done in his name. He doesn't want any of this, but he has to.
Mm-hmm.
He has to because if he doesn't, things get considerably worse.
Right.
The only way he can get to this point that he gets to in this book
Mm-hmm.
of truly ending it is if he survived and he did it. But there was a cost the entire time, And at the very end of the first story, there's this solemn,
Mm-hmm.
this solemn aura, like the same thing that Duncan has, the solemn aura that Paul has because he knows what this is going to
Mm-hmm.
entail. But this is Paul's true victory. Him being able to shatter his vision,
Mm-hmm.
to move on. This is his true victory, even though it cost him so much and it is so
Yeah.
tragic. It's the inverse of the first book where he has this victory, there's this tragedy couched in victory. But in
Mm-hmm.
this one, like we said at the very beginning, it's victory couched in tragedy. So yeah, I want to read a few little excerpts.
Okay. Let's see if it's the same.
See where we line up.
Uh-huh.
And this is from the chapter with B Jazz and this is from the chapter with B Jazz and Hate at the moment,
Uh-huh.
Duncan Idaho. And this is when uh, he's able to find when Duncan Idaho is able to finally realize that B Jazz is there for him,
Mm-hmm.
and then B Jazz starts to hum, just puts him
Right.
in this hypnotic state.
What page are you on? What page?
271.
That's I literally have two sort of work, right?
Yep.
Yep.
And he says to
Mm-hmm.
Hate, you know, you believe the silly emperor was the prize we sought. How little you understand our masters, the Tylexu. The guild and Bene Gesserit believe we produce artifacts. In reality, we produce tools and services. Anything can be a tool. Poverty, war. War is useful because it is effective in so many areas. It stimulates metabolism. It enforces government. It diffuses genetic strains. It possesses a vitality such as nothing else in the universe. Only those who recognize the value of war and exercise it have any degree of self-determination. You know, and this whole conversation thus far
Mm-hmm.
is one that I like. You could
Yeah.
for me to go.
You can keep on because I just have like and then I have 279. I start at paragraph 6. I have
Yeah.
because it's whole dialogues and things like that. So you could just
So
continue.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then so in an oddly placid voice, he said, "Strange thoughts coming from you, almost enough to make me believe in a vengeful providence. What restitution was exacted to create you? It would make a fascinating story, doubtless with an even more extraordinary epilogue. Magnificent, BJ Jordan. You attack, therefore you have willpower and exercise self-determination. You are trying to awaken violence in me," he said in a panting voice. I just love how, this particular mindset is not new.
Mm-hmm.
It's one that, especially like in these particular settings where someone always is talking about that it is only through conflict and strife that person is able to, really know what they're made of and
Mm-hmm.
self-determined. And it's just this very dangerous rationale
Uh-huh.
that people who these, as far as I'm concerned, these parasites who
Mm-hmm.
kind of live off of this strife
Mm-hmm.
justify it.
Right.
They try their best to make it sound more grandiose and have a
Right.
greater meaning than what it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is no integrity in struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Because like we said before, that evolution is a given of reality, but progress is not.
Right.
Things always move,
Mm-hmm.
for many particular reasons. But things changing and things becoming better,
Better.
that is a choice.
Right.
You know, and war and suffering,
Right.
does not entail progress. It does not entail growth.
Mm-hmm.
It
It entails
entails,
war. Right.
it entails regression. It
Right.
entails the opposite,
That's
actually,
right.
because it's constraining down everything to that level.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean anything to the rulers
Mm-hmm.
because it allows them to maintain their rule. And BJazz is he is a master of the Tylex,
Mm-hmm.
which means that he's been cloned many a times.
Right.
BJazz, he's been, because the face dancers they're like the working class of Benny Tylex.
Mm-hmm.
But BJazz he's a master.
Mm-hmm.
He's of the ruling class,
Mm-hmm.
and he's been and that's where his prescience comes from, because he's been cloned so many times. He's lived so many lives, you know, and him talking and to hate
Hate.
here is literally a master talking to a slave.
Mm-hmm.
I think he says it at one point. He literally
Yeah.
says, quiet slave, like
Mm-hmm.
screams at him, and to awaken this thing. And this is the rationale of
Mm-hmm.
of a ruler, of someone bound and determined to rule. This very, parasitic relationship where he's doing everything to try to justify
Mm-hmm.
this this uh this cycle of blood because that's the thing that sustains him.
Right.
That's where he comes from. But
Mm-hmm.
he's literally existed in luxury his entire life. He's been cloned into it. He's inherited
Right.
over and over again.
And I think that's even mentioned as well. How
Yeah, that's
right.
later on
Mm-hmm.
in Paul's
Right.
chapter. But yeah, BJ denied this with a shake of his head. Awaken violence. Awaken, yes. Violence, no. You are a disciple of awareness by training, so you have said. Having awareness to awaken in you, Duncan Idaho. Hate. Duncan Idaho. Killer extraordinaire, lover of many women. Swordsman, soldier, a treaty's field hand on the field of battle. Duncan Idaho. The past cannot be awakened. Cannot? It has never been done. True. But I will magnify the idea that something cannot be done. Always you seek the proper tool, the right application of effort, the services of the proper. You hide your real purpose. You throw up a screen of words and they mean nothing. There is a Duncan Idaho in you, BJ said. It will submit to emotion or to dispassionate examination, but submit it will. This awareness will rise to a screen of suppression and selection out of the dark past which dogs your footsteps. It goads you even now while it holds you back. There exists that being within you upon which awareness must focus and which you will obey. The Tylax who think I'm still their slave, but I quiet slave,
Mm-hmm.
BJ said in that whining voice. Hayat found himself frozen in silence. Now we are down to bedrock, Bijan said. I know you feel it, and these are the power words to manipulate you. I think they will have sufficient leverage. So yeah, that entire conversation
Mm-hmm.
was in just BJ's imprinting in himself, trying to awaken that Duncan Idaho part of him, but not Duncan, but just
Right.
the violent,
Mm-hmm.
the warrior. That he's trying to imprint him with this compulsion, and he successfully does. And he also talks about how Paul is Harkonnen.
Right.
He's Harkonnen because Jessica, like we
Yeah.
found out in Dune,
Right.
Jessica is the Baron's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's Harkonnen, and Duncan hates the
The Harkonnens,
Harkonnens.
right?
All
Yeah, I don't
Pretty
know.
much
Yeah, yeah, everybody hates, right?
all of the attendants of
Right.
House
Right.
Atreides
Hates the
hate the
Harkonnens.
Harkonnens. Gurney hates them. Pepper
Yeah.
Howard hated them,
Yeah.
and Duncan hates them.
Right.
Even Yue hates
Yeah.
the Harkonnens.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone hates the Harkonnens, and by bringing up his Harkonnen blood,
Right.
it's like
It gives you more reasons, more
yeah,
justification
more justification.
to kill Paul.
Really playing on that hatred.
Mm-hmm.
Stop seeing him as as the young masters. See
Mm-hmm.
him as a tool of the Harkonnens,
Right.
and then just plying him
Mm-hmm.
with this compulsion.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very end, after he makes him forget, you know, and this is after he makes him forget.
Right.
That's when Hate says, "You think to confuse me and manipulate me. How was that?" BJ says. "I am your target, and you can't deny it," he said. "I would not think of denying it. What is it you tried to do with me?" "A kindness," BJ said. "A simple kindness." So yeah, a kindness has been done
Uh-huh.
to Hate,
Mm-hmm.
and now this compulsion, and even Duncan has been infected with it,
Mm-hmm.
with hate.
Right.
Duncan has been infected with hate, and now he has this compulsion to kill Paul.
Right.
When he says, she's gone.
Uh-huh.
And the entire plan is that when she says this, is to tempt Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Is to try to get closer and closer and closer
Mm-hmm.
to him. By saying we could bring him back and all this stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
just trying to continuously tempt him just so he lets his guard down just
Mhm.
enough
Right.
so he could deliver the final blow.
Right.
So yeah, and in this next chapter,
Mhm.
like we said, this is the Aaliyah chapter,
Mhm.
and this is one of the chapters that I actually want to read.
Okay.
But you
Good.
can read.
Okay.
But yeah,
Hopefully I don't stumble. All right. The sequential nature of actual events is not illuminated with lengthy precision by the powers of prescience except under the most extraordinary circumstances. The oracle grasps incidents cut out of the historic chain. Eternity moves. It inflicts itself upon the oracle and the supplicant alike. Let Muad'Dib's subjects doubt his majesty and his oracle visions. Let them deny his powers. Let them never doubt eternity. Hate watched Aaliyah emerge from her temple and cross the plaza. Her guard was bunched close, fierce expressions on their faces to mask the lines molded by good living and complacency. The heliograph of thopter wings flashed in the bright afternoon sun above the temple, part of the royal guard, with Muad'Dib's fist symbol on its fuselage.
fuselage.
Fuselage. Hyatt returned his gaze to Aaliyah. She looked out of place here in the city, he thought. Her proper setting was the desert, open, untrampled space. An odd thing about her came back to him as he watched her approach. Aaliyah appeared thoughtful only when she smiled. It was a trick of the eyes, he decided, recalling a cameo memory of her as she appeared at the reception of the Guild ambassador, haughty against a background of music and brittle conversation among extravagant gowns and uniforms. And Aaliyah had been wearing white, dazzling, a bright garment of chastity. He had looked down upon her from a window as she crossed an inner garden with its formal pond, its fluting fountains, fronds of pampas grass, and a white belvedere. Entirely wrong. All wrong. She belonged in the desert. Hate drew in a ragged breath. Aaliyah had moved out of his view then as she did now. He waited, clenching and unclenching his fists. The interview with Bajaz had left him uneasy. He heard Aaliyah's entourage pass outside the room where he waited. She went into the family quarters. Now he tried to focus on the thing about her which troubled him. The way she walked across the plaza? Yes, she moved like a hunted creature fleeing some predator. He stepped out onto the connecting balcony, walked along it behind the plasma sunscreen, stopped while still in concealing shadows. Aaliyah stood at the balustrade overlooking her temple. He looked where she was looking, out over the city. He saw rectangles, blocks of color, creeping movements of life and sound. Structures gleamed, shimmered. Heat patterns spiraled off the rooftops. There was a boy across the way bouncing a ball in a cul-de-sac formed by a buttressed massif at a corner of the temple. Back and forth the ball went. Aaliyah, too, watched the ball. She felt a compelling identity with the ball. Back and forth, back and forth. She sensed herself bouncing through corridors of time. The potion of melange she drained just before leaving the temple was the largest she ever attempted, a massive overdose. Even before beginning to take effect, it had terrified her. Why did I do it? She asked herself. One made a choice between dangers. Was that it? This was the way to penetrate the fog spread over the future by that damnable Dune Tarot. A barrier existed. It must be breached. She had acted out of necessity to see where it was her brother walked with his eyeless stride. The familiar melange fugue set began creeping into her awareness. She took a deep breath, experienced a brittle form of calm, poised and selfless. Possession of second sight has a tendency to make one a dangerous fatalist, she thought.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, there existed no abstract leverage, no calculus of prescience. Visions of the future could not be manipulated as formulas. One had to enter them, risking life and sanity. A figure moved from the harsh shadows of the adjoining balcony. The Gula! In her heightened awareness, Aaliyah saw him with intense clarity, the dark, lively features dominated by those glistening metal eyes. He was a union of terrifying opposites, something put together in a shocking linear way. He was shadow and blazing light, a product of the process which had revived his dead flesh, and of something intensely pure, innocent. He was innocence under siege.
Uh, I just want to because
Mm-hmm.
I love all the Vision chapters and all the Dune, all the Dune.
Mm-hmm.
I love every time we get to see how they see,
Mm-hmm.
and it's. I mean, I love how Frank Herbert kind of like explains prescience because how do you even explain something
Right.
like that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you can't like they have this vision, they have this power, but they can't control
Control
it.
it. Right.
The only way that it's useful to them is if they give themselves entirely to it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, like you say, you can't use it intentionally,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to do that, it's like a fish. The harder you try to hold it, the more it flops around and it
Mm-hmm.
can leave your hand. You know, but my favorite part is obviously when she talks about Duncan,
Mm-hmm.
right, and how he is innocence under siege, and that just it reminds me so much of Paul in the first Dune
Mm-hmm.
when Paul, he because Duncan didn't ask to be reborn.
That's right.
He didn't ask to be made to hate.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't ask to become as Zinsuni Mentat and have all this knowledge in his head and to be this person. He never asked for any of it, but he's here now.
Mm-hmm.
He's here and he has all of these compulsions inside of him, but there is an innocence to him as well, just like Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it's like the reason why these last chapters are so Duncan heavy.
Mm-hmm.
It's because like we talked about before in the lonely power, and that sometimes the fate of a civilization rests on the hands of a very few people,
Mm-hmm.
and in this case, it rests on the hands of one person,
Right.
and that's Duncan Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
It is his choices, his actions
Mm-hmm.
that are going to truly shape their whatever comes next. He Duncan finds himself in Paul's position of being like what he does is going to shape the future.
Mm-hmm.
If he doesn't awaken, if he doesn't
Right.
stop himself, if he doesn't come to this realization, if he can't do this, then everything falls apart. So it is Duncan is the fulcrum. I think that's what it literally. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah. It literally says that.
he's the fulcrum now.
Right.
He's the way in which reality moves.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I just love that. I
Mm-hmm.
love that it's Duncan's turn to sit in the seat that Paul has been sitting in this entire time.
Have you been there all along, Duncan? She asked. So I'm to be Duncan, he said. Why? Don't question me, she said, and she thought, looking at him, that the Tyloo had left no corner of their gula unfinished. Only gods can safely risk perfection, she said. It's a dangerous thing for a man. Duncan died, he said, wishing she would not call him that. I am hate. She studied his artificial eyes, wondering what they saw. Observed closely. They betrayed tiny black pockmarks, little wells of darkness in the glittering metal. Vastness. The universe shimmered around her and lurched. She studied herself with a hand on the sun-warmed surface of the balustrade. Ah, the melange moved swiftly. Are you ill? Hyatt asked. He moved closer, the steely eyes open wide, staring. Who spoke? She wondered. Was it Duncan Idaho? Was it the Mentat Gula or the Zen Sunni philosopher? Or was it a Tyloo pawn more dangerous than any guild steersman? Her brother knew. Again, she looked at the Gula. There was something inactive about him now, a latent something. He was saturated with waiting, and with powers beyond their common life. Out of my mother, I am like the Bene Gesserit, she said. Do you know that? I know it. I use their powers. Think as they think. Part of me knows the sacred urgency of the breeding program and its products. She blinked, feeling part of her awareness begin to move freely in time. It is said that the Bene Gesserit never let go, he said, and he watched her closely, noting how white her knuckles were where he where she gripped the edge of the balcony. Have I stumbled? She asked. He marked how deeply she breathed, with tension in every movement, the glazed appearance of her eyes. When you stumble, he said, you may regain your balance by jumping beyond the thing that tripped you. The Bene Gesserit stumbled, she said. Now they wish to regain their balance by leaping beyond my brother. They want Chinese baby, or mine. Are you a child? She struggled to fix herself in a time-space relationship to this question. With child? When? Where? I see my child, she whispered. She moved away from the balcony's edge, turned her head to look at the gula. He had a face of salt, bitter eyes, two circles of glistening lead, and as he turned away from the light to follow her movement, blue shadows. What do you see with such eyes? She whispered. What other eyes see? He said. His words rang in her ears, stretching her awareness. She felt that she reached across the universe. Such a stretching. Out, out. She lay intertwined with all time. You've taken the spice, a large dose, he said. Why can't I see him? She muttered. The womb of all creation held her captive. Tell me, Duncan, why I cannot see him. Who can't you see? I cannot see the father of my children. I'm lost in the tarot fog. Help me. And Ted Logic offered its prompt computation, and he said, the Bene Gesserit want a mating between you and your brother. It will lock the genetic. It will escape her. The egg in the flesh, she gasped. A sensation of chill swept over her, followed by intense heat. The unseen mate of her darkest dreams. Flesh of her flesh that the oracle could not reveal. Would it come to that? Have you risked a dangerous dose of the spice? He asked. Something within him fought to express the utmost terror at the thought that an Atreides woman might die, or Paul might face him with the knowledge that a female of the royal family had gone. You don't know what it's like to haunt the future, she said. Sometimes I glimpse myself, but I get in my own way. I cannot see through myself. She lowered her head, shook it from side to side. How much of the spice did you take? He asked. Nature abhors pretense, she said, raising her head. Did you know that, Duncan? He spoke softly, reasonably, as to a small child. Tell me how much of the spice you took. He took hold of her shoulder with his left hand. Words are such gross machinery. So primitive and ambiguous, she said. She pulled away from his hand. You must tell me, he said. Look at that sheer wall, she commanded, pointing. She sent her gaze along her own outstretched hand, trembled at the landscape crumbled in an overwhelming vision, a sandcastle destroyed by invisible waves. She averted her eyes, was transfixed by the appearance of the ghoul's face. His features crawled, became aged, then young, aged, young. He was life itself, assertive, endless. She turned to flee, but he grabbed her left wrist. I am going to summon a doctor, he said. No, you must let me have the vision. I have to know. You are going inside now, he said. She stared down at his hand. Where their flesh touched, she felt an electric presence that both lured and frightened her. She jerked free, gasped. You can't hold the whirlwind. You must have medical help, he snapped. Don't you understand? She demanded. My vision's incomplete, just fragments. It flickers and jumps. I have to remember the future. Can't you see that? What is the future if you die? He asked. forcing her gently into the family chambers. Words, words, she muttered. I can't explain it. One thing is the occasion of another thing, but there's no cause, no effect. We can't leave the universe as it was. Try as we may, there's a gap. Stretch out here, he commanded.
I just want to use
Mm-hmm.
because I love this whole I love this whole little part here
Mm-hmm.
where Leah is she's able to because as alluded to earlier in the Aaliyah chapter, and I think in the first Aaliyah chapter,
Mm-hmm.
no, not the first one, the because we first see Aaliyah when they're at the council meeting, but in the second one,
Right, when
she's
she's
fighting
fighting the
the
right.
dummy.
Mm-hmm.
When she's in, when she's taking a bath, she feels this presence, like
Mm-hmm.
this presence in her future, right? This face that she can't see, but she
Mm-hmm.
knows that there's someone there in her future, And in this chapter, she's able to realize who that person in her future is,
Mm-hmm.
and it's Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And I also love this chapter because it plays back in on that thing where it's 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 like when she first goes into the desert with hate and they investigate
Right.
it was hate that is able to shock her into awareness
Mm-hmm.
constantly and allow her to get to the solution that
Right.
it was a face dancer.
Mm-hmm.
And once again it's hate that is
Right.
giving that is allowing her to make these leaps and allowing her to really go through this vision
Mm-hmm.
and come to some conclusion about it when hate offers up the mid-tech computation that it might be your brother
Mm-hmm.
because if you breed with Paul, then the genetic line is secure.
Right.
And in doing that, when she said that she sees her children
Mm-hmm.
and the father of her children is her own brother,
Mm-hmm.
that makes her fall back into herself once again.
Mm-hmm.
Because she is a Bene Gesserit,
Right.
right? And there's a part of her that is willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, part of her that's willing to secure the genetic line like that. And that scares her even more.
Mm-hmm.
you know, and she talks about how words fail and how she's existing in like this timeless place at the
Mm-hmm.
moment where everything is happening, but there is no cause and there is no
No
effect.
effect. Right.
It's kind of this eternalist view of time that she's existing in, where everything is everything,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't make anything happen, but everything is
Happening.
happening,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and well, I said, and words are failing her, and her
Mm-hmm.
vision, nature hates
Mm-hmm.
prescience. Nature hates any form you try to give it,
That's right.
whether it's now or
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow.
Right.
And she is just trying so hard because she just wants to know
Why?
why
Mm-hmm.
Paul is doing this. She just wants to know,
Right.
and she's constantly pushing. And I love how like she goes like, look at that shield wall,
Right.
and Duncan is just like, how much
Uh-huh.
spice
Spice
have
did
you
you
taken?
take it? Right.
You know, and he is pulling her in. And she
Right.
goes, you can't control the whirlwind. Like
Yeah, she's going.
she's
But not
completely
going, but
lost her
right,
vision at this
right.
moment. Like you can't control the whirlwind. All this magnanimous stuff. Like you just know that she
Mm-hmm.
just high over.
Right. How's the
But
spice, right?
but she Duncan is able to pull her into the
Mm-hmm.
family chambers and stuff like that. But the entire time, Aaliyah is just caught in
Right.
this vision, and I
Vision.
just love how prescience is described here
Mm-hmm.
because it's those little moments I think that happens to all of us. The deja vu type thing when you feel like you're experiencing something that you've always experienced,
Mm-hmm.
that you're having this kind of out of body experience
Mm-hmm.
where everything is everything, but you can't do anything about
About
it.
it, right.
It's not yours. It's just a perspective. It's just a thing that you see, and it moves on its own volition, right? No cause, no effect, just movement, just being, you know. But yeah,
Stretch out here, he commanded. He is so dense, she thought. Cool shadows enveloped her. She felt her own muscles crawling like worms, a firm bed that she knew to be insubstantial. Only space was permanent. Nothing else had substance. The The bed flowed with many bodies, all of them her own. Time became a multiple sensation, overloaded. It presented no single reaction for her to abstract. It was time. It moved. The whole universe slipped backward, forward, sideways. It has no thing aspect, she explained. You can't get under it or around it. There's no place to get leverage. There came a fluttering of people all around her. Many someone held her left hand. She looked at her own moving flesh, followed a twining arm, yeah, a twining arm out to a fluid mass of face. Duncan, Idaho. His eyes were wrong, but it was Duncan. Child, man, adolescent, child, man, adolescent. Every line of his features betrayed concern for her. Duncan, don't be afraid, she whispered. He squeezed her hand, nodded. Be still, he said. And he thought, she must not die. She must not. No Atreides woman can die. He shook his head sharply. Such thoughts defied mentat logic. Death was a necessity that life might continue. The Gula loves me, Aaliyah thought. The thought became bedrock to which she might cling. He was a familiar face with a solid room behind him. She recognized one of the bedrooms in Paul's suite. A fixed, immutable person did something with a tube in her throat. She fought against retching. We got her in time, the voice said, and she recognized the tones of a family medic. You should have called me sooner. There was suspicion in the medic's voice. She felt the tube slide out of her throat. A snake, a shimmering cord. The slap shot will make her sleep, the medic said. I'll send one of her attendants to. I'll stay with her, the Gula said. That is not seemly, the medic snapped. Stay, Duncan, Aaliyah whispered. He stroked her hair to tell her he'd heard. My lady, the medic said, it'd be better if you do not tell me what is best, she rasped. Her throat ached with each syllable. My lady, the medic said, voice accusing. You know the dangers of consuming too much melange. I can only assume someone gave it to you without. You're a fool, she raps. Why you deny me my visions? I knew what I took and why. She put her hand to her throat. Leave us at once. The medic pulled out of her field of vision, said, I will send word to your brother. She felt him leave, turned her attention to the Gula. The vision lay clearly in her awareness now, a culture medium in which the present grew outward. She sensed the Gula move in that play of time, no longer cryptic, fixed now against a recognizable background. He is the crucible, she thought. He is danger and salvation.
Mhm.
And she shuddered, knowing she saw the vision her brother had seen. Unwanted tears burned her eyes. She shook her head sharply. No tears. They wasted moisture and worse, distracted the harsh flow of vision. Paul must be stopped. Once, just once, she had bridged time to place her voice where he would pass, but stress and multibility would not permit that here. The web of time passed through her brother now like rays of light through a lens. He stood at the focus and he knew it. He had gathered all the lines to himself and would not permit them to escape or change. Why? She muttered. Is it hate? Does he strike out at time itself because it hurt him? Is that it? Hate? Thinking he heard her speak his name, the Gula said, Malay. If I could only burn this thing out of me, she cried. I didn't want to be different. Please, Aaliyah, he murmured. Let yourself sleep. I wanted to be able to laugh, she whispered. Tears slid down her cheeks. But I am sister to an emperor who's worshipped as a god. People fear me. I never wanted to be feared. He wiped the tears from her face. I don't want to be part of history, she whispered. I just wanted to be loved and to love. You are love, he said. Ah, loyal, loyal Duncan, she said. Please don't call me that, he pleaded. But you are, she said. And loyalty is a valued commodity. It can be sold, not bought, but sold. I don't like your cynicism, he said. Damn your logic, it's true. Sleep, he said. Do you love me, Duncan? She asked. Yes. Is that one of those lies? She asked. One of the lies that are easier to believe than the truth? Why am I afraid to believe you? You feel my difference as you feel your own. Be a man, not a mentat, she snored. I am a mentat and a man. Will you make me your woman then? I will do what love demands. And loyalty? And loyalty. That's where you're dangerous, she said. Her words disturbed him. No sign of the disturbance arose to his face. No muscle trembled. But she knew it. Vision memory exposed the disturbance. She felt that she had missed part of the vision, though. Sh- that she should remember something else from the future. There existed another perception which did not go precisely by the senses, a thing which fell into her head from nowhere the way prescience did. It lay in the time shadows, infinitely painful. Emotion, that was it, emotion. It had appeared in the vision, not directly, but as a product from which she could infer what lay behind. She had been possessed by emotion, a single constriction made up of fear, grief, and love. They lay there in the vision, all collected into a single epidemic body, overpowering and primordial. Duncan, don't let me go, she whispered. Sleep, he said. Don't fight. I must, I must. He is the bait in his own trap. He is the servant of power and terror. Violence. Deification is a prison enclosing him. He'll lose everything. It'll tear him apart. You speak of Paul? They drive him to destroy himself, she grasped, arching her back. Too much weight, too much grief. They seduce him away from love. She sank back to the bed. They're creating a universe where he won't permit himself to live. Who is doing this? He is. Oh, you're so dense. He's part of the pattern. It's too late. Too late. Too late. As she spoke, she felt her awareness descend, layer by layer. It came to rest directly behind her navel. Body and mind separated and merged in a storehouse of relic visions. Moving, moving. She heard a fetal heartbeat, a child of the future. The melange still possessed her, then setting her adrift in time. She knew she had tasted the life of a child not yet conceived. One thing certain about this child, it would suffer the same awakening she had suffered. It would be an aware, thinking entity before birth.
Yeah, and I love like once again at the end when she's finally able to pierce a little further
Mm-hmm.
and see what Paul is doing.
Because I
Still not,
actually have the 287 to the whole
mhm,
dialogue, the whole thing.
yeah,
I'm not
still
gonna write
not
all
able
that.
to still not able to see why.
Mm-hmm.
He does see what,
Right.
and I love that they're creating a universe where he won't permit himself to live.
Mm-hmm.
The entire plan is to poison his psyche, to isolate him, and to make him feel such a tremendous amount of pain that he feels no choice
Mm-hmm.
but to end it. I guess they kind of get what they want in the end because he does walk off into the desert.
Yeah.
But you get what you wanted, but not what you asked for. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. That's a good
everybody,
way
yeah.
to put
So
it. Right.
and I love how he's like, well, and then Duncan asks, like, "Who's doing this?" And
Mm-hmm. Yes. Good. Yeah.
he
Oh.
is, and
Right.
he has all the strings.
Mm-hmm.
He is, let's say, he's like, I don't know. It's like when you see like a black hole in space, like when you see that how everything just bends and
Right.
around it, and everything
Mm-hmm.
just falling into it. That's him.
Mm-hmm.
He's that little fold in space that's holding everything. A little he's that point that's just moving, and everything else is moving around it. You know, he no he is the one who's creating this universe, a universe where he won't permit himself to exist.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one doing it. No, nothing has a bigger, stake. Nothing has a larger amount of control over his life than Paul does.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and she may not be able to recognize why he's doing it, but I just love that You know, he's the one facilitating.
Yeah.
He's a part of the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
He's allowing
These things, yeah, happen.
all these things to come to
Mm-hmm.
pass. She may not know why, but she does get a sense for that child,
Mm-hmm.
and that whatever child is coming, like there's another figure that she can't see.
Mm-hmm.
There's another figure that she can't see. And remember, oracles are able to hide themselves.
Right.
And that's kind of why I think Paul didn't see Leto.
Mm-hmm.
Because oracles are able to hide themselves. They're
Mm-hmm.
able to hide themselves from other oracles. And but she knows that the children will be preborn.
Mm-hmm.
That those children, whatever those future children may be,
Right.
that they will be preborn. They're going to awaken to an awareness, you know, before they ever, leave the womb.
Yeah.
And so that's what she rests on at the very end.
Wow.
Maybe that's one of the reasons why Paul chose Chani to do this because
Mm-hmm.
Aaliyah was preborn and
Mm-hmm.
it scarred her for life.
Right.
That she never got to be a child.
Mm-hmm.
She was born an old woman with all of these, preconceived notions of
Right.
who she is and what she's supposed to be, and it scarred her so
Mm-hmm.
tremendously that just I guess it's good that she isn't the one having to give birth to preborn children
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, it won't
Yeah.
work for any of them. So yeah, and in the next chapter,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, this is Chinese, and I have the heading quote here. But
So do I.
there exists a limit to the force even the most powerful may apply without destroying themselves. Judging this limit is the true artistry of government. Misuse of power is the fatal sin. The law cannot be a tool of vengeance, never a hostage, nor a fortification against the martyrs it has created. You cannot threaten the individual and escape the consequences. Just
I mean,
and
I literally have
that's
it. Yeah.
from Muad'Dib himself.
Right.
That's from the words of Paul himself.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing lasts forever.
That's
You
right.
can't control the world for long. You create a consequence. Anytime if you try to use your law to marshal it against people and use it to protect yourself, you try to use it in some one-way street, you are signing your death warrant. It cannot last.
Sounds familiar?
And so yeah, let me see some other ones. Where was it? Yeah, here we go. And then there's this one little part here that says I love it because this is Chani and she's outside and she's thinking why all these people why are
Right.
we bringing all these people
Right. I don't even like all y'all.
because
I don't even like y'all.
he's bringing BJ
Right. I
and
don't even
guys
like all
like
y'all.
me and all this
I don't even like y'all.
and he's saying that they have to be here but
Right.
if Paul really wanted to he could just say it's just me and Chani
Right.
and nobody
Right.
because he's the emperor
Right.
but he says these things and he says we have forgotten that the word company originally meant traveling companions.
Mm-hmm.
We are company.
Mm-hmm.
But what value are they? There. We've lost that clear single note of living. If it cannot be bottled, beaten, pointed, or hoarded, we give it no value. That's not what I meant. Dearest one, he said, soothing. We are so money rich and so life poor.
Mm-hmm.
I am evil, obstinate, stupid. You are not. That too is true, but my hands are blue with time. I think I tried to invent life, not realizing it already been invented.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such I understand. I get that so much.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying so hard to perfect a thing that's already been perfected,
Yep.
trying to reinvent the wheel,
Mm-hmm.
trying to do more than what's called for,
Mm-hmm.
trying to invent
Right.
life. It's like I said before, you can't build peace.
Right.
It's already been built. You can only reach it.
Mm-hmm.
We know what that is,
Right.
but you go in and try to build it, but you only end up contributing to the madness.
Mm-hmm.
You can only reach it. You can't create life. You can only reach it,
Mm-hmm.
understand it. It's already been invented. The
Yeah.
work's already been
Been
done,
done.
right? But Paul is like he is the emperor, which is the archetypal builder.
Mm-hmm.
He's created all of this, whether intentionally or unintentionally. He's created this, you know, and he laments it. Like he's evil. Options like, no, you're not. But
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm not, but I am. I am
Right.
all these things, because I have set myself on a task of true futility, trying to invent life, you know, and I just love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love it because that's where a lot of us find ourselves sometimes when we do more than what is necessary.
Right.
And I think that's Jake the Snake Roberts promo. He said, you go above and beyond in the Call of Duty
Right.
when you find your this is then he was talking about the Macho Man Randy Savage. He
Right.
had I think he had the hit Miss Elizabeth and DDT'd and all that stuff, and he had made the Macho Man so mad. He said, desperate men go above and beyond in the
Yeah,
Call
that's
of
right.
Duty, and
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah, well you work out of
When
desperation,
you're
yes.
desperation, you feel like you need to go above and
Above and
beyond.
beyond, that's
You're
right.
doing more than what's necessary.
Yep.
Just take a breath and realize the work that's already been done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's reinforced in this little part about the Zinsuni approach to birth, which I feel is applicable to just about anything in life. It says, the Zinsuni approach to birth is to wait without purpose in the state of highest tension. Do not compete with what is happening. To compete is to prepare for failure. Do not be trapped by the need to achieve anything. This way you achieve everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's once again one of those things that I feel that a lot of us deal with.
Mm-hmm.
We all have this need to be something, and you feel like you have to earn it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That if you do this, if you do that, if you make it, and you're competing, you're trying your best to compete, trying your best to be something,
Right.
and you think that there's a prerequisite to respect and a prerequisite to love and all
Mm-hmm.
these things that you have to earn
Earn
it.
it, right.
And when you live in that mindset, you just don't have it in you, and you go above and beyond.
Beyond, right. Right.
In the Call of Duty,
Mm-hmm.
doing the most unnecessary things when all it takes is don't compete.
Mm-hmm.
You've won the race. You've been born.
Mm-hmm.
You are alive.
Right.
You need to do nothing else to be loved and respected. That is the greatest accomplishment.
Right.
You were born. You
Mm-hmm.
are a living embodiment of the miracle of existence.
Right. And
you don't have to do anything beyond that. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to succeed. You don't
Right.
have to compete.
That's
These
right.
things will happen in and of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Just allow you to be what you are.
Mm-hmm.
Just exist in that space. Don't fight it. Don't try to force it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like exist in a state of ultimate tension.
Right.
Realize all the forces that are tugging at your life and just flow.
Mm-hmm.
Just go with it. And that's a thing that I feel that is like runs contrary to everything
Yeah.
that we're told about what life is
Mm-hmm.
and how we're supposed to go about it, because everyone's trying and trying and
Yeah, I
trying.
mean, you have people who really think, that they're not worthy, they're not even making money in their sleep,
Mhm.
and that the only way that you're actually doing anything is if you're making money in your sleep, is if, you have to earn respect and earn it. It's draining you of life. That's what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Where every moment of your life, if every aspect of your life is a commodity, or every minute, like I said, you're trying to monetize
Every minute,
minute of
has to be in service to this race.
right. So that's a flaw in this. Well,
Yeah.
that's just what it is, right?
So in the next chapter,
Mm-hmm.
which is the one that I want to read,
Right.
is this is it.
Right.
Everything after this is the epilogue.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is really this is it. This is Paul's crowning achievement.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There was a man so wise, he jumped into a sandy place and burnt out both his eyes. And when he knew his eyes were gone, he offered no complaint. He summoned up a vision and made himself a saint. A children's verse.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Paul stood in darkness outside the siege. Oracular vision told him it was night. That moonlight silhouette at the shrine atop Chin Rock High on his left. This was a memory-saturated place. His first siege, where he and Chani... I must not think of Chani, he told himself. The thinning cup of his vision told him of changes all around. A cluster of palms far down to the right, the black silver line of a Quanah carrying water through the dunes piled up by that morning storm. Water flowing in a desert. He recalled another kind of water flowing in the river of his birth world, Caladan. He hadn't realized then the treasure of such a flow, even the murky slithering in the Quanah across a desert basin. Treasure. With a delicate cough, an aide came up from behind. Paul held out his hands for a magna board with a single sheet of metallic paper on it. He moved as sluggishly as the Quanah's water. The vision flowed, but he found himself increasingly reluctant to move with it. Pardon, sire, the aide said. The Symboli Treaty, your signature, I can read it, Paul snapped. He scrawled Atreides Emperor in the proper place, returned the board, thrusting it directly into the aide's outstretched hand, aware of the fear this inspired. Ooh, excuse me. Aware of the fear this inspired. The man fled. Paul turned away. Ugly, barren land. He imagined it sun-soaked and monstrous with heat, a place of sand slides and the drowned darkness of dust pools, blow devils, unreeling tiny dunes across the rocks, their narrow bellies full of ochre crystals. But it was a rich land too, big, exploding out of narrow places with vistas of storm-trodden emptiness, rampart cliffs, and tumble-down ridges. All it required was water and love. Life changed those irascible wastes into shapes of grace and movement, he thought. That was the message of the desert. Contrast stunned him with realization. He wanted to turn to the aides amassed in the siege entrance, shout to them, if you need something to worship, then worship life. All life. Every last crawling bit of it. We're all in this beauty together. I love that. It's one of the few times where water isn't seen as a poison, where he sees it as a treasure.
I literally wrote it down.
Yeah, he sees it as a treasure, and he says that everyone's so quick to deify him, to try to make a god when you're surrounded by it all together. Worship the beauty of nature, worship life. You know, they wouldn't understand. In the desert, they were endlessly desert. Growing things performed no green ballet for them. He clenched his fists at his sides, trying to halt the vision. He wanted to flee from his own mind. It was a beast come to devour him. Awareness lay in him, sodden, heavy with all the living it had sponged up, saturated with too many experiences. Desperately, Paul squeezed his thoughts outward. Stars! Awareness turned over at the thought of all those stars above him. An infinite volume. A man must be half mad to imagine he could rule even a teardrop of that volume. He couldn't begin to imagine the number of subjects his imperium claimed. Subjects. Worshippers and enemies, more likely. Did any among them see beyond rigid beliefs? Where was one man who had escaped the narrow destiny of his prejudices? Not even an emperor escaped. He lived a take-everything life, tried to create a universe in his own image, but the exalted universe was breaking across him at last with its silent waves. I spit on Dune, he thought. I give it my moisture. The like the most respectful and disrespectful act that he could possibly give to this planet. This myth had made out this myth he'd made out of intricate movement and imagination, out of moonlight and love, out of prayers older than Adam, and great cliffs and crimson shadows, laments and rivers of martyrs. What had it come to at last? When the waves receded, the shores of time were spread out there clean, empty, shining with infinite grains of memory and little else. Was this the golden genesis of man? Sand scuffed against rocks told him that the Gula had joined him. You've been avoiding me today, Duncan, Paul said. It's dangerous for you to call me that, the Gula said. I know. I came to warn you, my lord. I know. The story of the compulsion BJS had put on him poured from the Gula then. Do you know the nature of the compulsion? Paul asked. Violence. Paul felt himself arriving at a place which had claimed him from the beginning. He stood suspended. The jihad had seized him, fixed him onto a glide path from which the terrible gravity of the future would never release him. There'll be no violence from Duncan, Paul whispered. Messiah, tell me what you see around us, Paul said. My lord, the desert. How was it tonight? Don't you see it? I have no eyes, Duncan. But I've only my vision, Paul said, and wish I didn't have it. I'm dying of prescience. Did you know that, Duncan? Perhaps. Which you fear won't happen, the Gula said. What? Deny my own oracle? How can I when I've seen it fulfilled thousands of times? People call it a power, a gift. It's an affliction.
Mm-hmm.
It won't let me leave my life where I found it. The Lord, the Gula muttered, I, it isn't, young master, you don't, I, he fell silent. Paul sensed the Gula's confusion, said, what do you call me, Duncan? What? What I, for a moment, you called me young master. I did, yes. That's what Duncan always called me. Paul reached out, touched the Gula's face. Was that part of your Taletsu training? No. Paul lowered his hand. What then? It came from me. Do you serve two masters? Perhaps. Free yourself from the Gula, Duncan. How? You're a human. Do a human thing. I'm a Gula, but your flesh is human. Duncan's in there. Something's in there. I care not how you do it, Paul said, but you'll do it. You foreknowledge? Foreknowledge be damned! Paul turned away. His vision hurtled forward now, gaps in it, but it wasn't a thing to be stopped. My lord, you've quiet! Paul held up a hand. Did you hear that? Hear what, my lord? Paul shook his head. Duncan hadn't heard him. Had he only imagined the sound? It had been his tribal name called from the desert, far away and low. Uso. Uso. What is it, my lord? Paul shook his head. He felt watched. Something out there in the night shadows knew he was here. Something. No. Someone. It was mostly sweet, he whispered, and you were the sweetest of all. What did you say, my lord? It's the future. That amorphous human universe out there had undergone a spurt of motion, dancing to the tune of his vision. It had struck a powerful note then. The ghost echoes might endure. I don't understand, my lord, the Gula said. A Freeman dies when he's too long from the desert, Paul said. They call it water sickness. Isn't that odd? That's very odd. Paul strained at memories, tried to recall the sound of Chani breathing beside him in the night. Where is their comfort, he wondered. All he could remember was Chani at breakfast, the day they left for the desert. She'd been restless, irritable. Why do you wear that jacket? She demanded, eyeing the black uniform coat with its red hawk crest beneath his Freeman robes. You're an emperor. Even an emperor has his favorite clothing, he said. For no reason he could explain, this had brought real tears to Chani's eyes. The second time in her life from Freeman inhibitions had been shattered. Now in the darkness, Paul rubbed his own cheeks, felt moisture there. Who gives moisture to the dead, he wondered. It was his own face, and not his. The wind chilled the wet skin, a frail dream formed broken. What was this swelling in his breast? Was it something he'd eaten? How bitter and plaintive was this other self, giving moisture to the dead? The wind bristled with sand. The skin, dry now, was his own, but whose was the quivering which remained? They heard the wailing then. Far away in the siege depths, it grew louder, louder. The Gula whirled at a sudden glare of light, someone flinging wide the entrance seals. In the light, he saw a man with a raffish grin. No, not a grin, but a grimace of grief. It was a Fedaykin lieutenant named Tandis. Behind him came a press of many people, all falling silent now that they saw Muad'Dib. Chani, Tandis said, is dead, Paul whispered. I heard her call. He turned toward the siege. He knew this place. It was a place where he could not hide. Its onrushing vision illuminated the entire Freeman mob. He saw Tandis, felt the Fedaykin's grief, the fear and anger. She is gone, Paul said. The Gula heard the words out of a blazing corona. They burned his chest, his backbone, the sockets of his metal eyes. He felt his right hand move toward the knife at his belt. His own thinking became strange, disjointed. He was a puppet held fast by strings reaching down from that awful corona. He moved to another's commands, to another's desires. The strings jerked his arms, his legs, his jaw. Sounds came squeezing out of his mouth. A terrifying, repetitive noise. Hurrah! 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 The knife came up to strike. In that instant he grabbed his own voice, shaped the rasping words. Run, young master, run! We will not run, Paul said. We'll move with dignity. We'll do what must be done.
Mm-hmm.
The Gula's muscles locked. He shuddered, swayed. What must be done? The words rolled in his mind like a great fish surfacing. What must be done? Ah, that had sounded like the old Duke, Paul's grandfather. The young master had some of the old man in him. What must be done? The words began to unfold in the ghoul's consciousness. A sensation of living two lives simultaneously spread out through his awareness. Hate, Idaho, hate, Idaho. He became a motionless chain of relative existence, singular, alone. Old memories flooded his mind. He marked them, adjusted them to new understandings, made a beginning at the interrogation of a new awareness. A new persona achieved a temporary form of internal tyranny. The masculating synthesis remained charged with potential disorder, but events pressed him to the temporary adjustment. The young master needed him. It was done then. He knew himself as Duncan Idaho, remembering everything of hate as though it had been stored secretly in him and ignited by a flaming catalyst. The corona dissolved. He shared the Tilax with compulsion. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
Duncan is
We're
reawakened.
working. Mm-hmm.
Early on in the story, we heard Paul talk about being husbandman to
Mm-hmm.
his people,
Right.
which is something that his grandfather said, which was alive in his memories. And it's that right there, that compulsion, which has led him to make this ultimate sacrifice. He's facing the bull, just like his grandfather, and he knows he's going to be gored by the horns,
Mm-hmm.
just like his father knew that he was going to die on Arrakis when he first went there. That's their roles,
Mm-hmm.
and but Paul didn't have to do it. Just like his grandfather didn't have to face a bull. But every now and then, you have to make a sacrifice for your people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do something for them and them alone. You have to save the future. And Paul says this just in that one phrase: "We will do it with dignity. We'll do what must be done." He says that to Duncan, and Duncan remembers hearing that from the grandfather. And in that moment, he was hate.
Right.
He was Idaho. He was all of these people. And he kind of fell in on himself to become someone new,
Mm-hmm.
to become a new Duncan Idaho. Someone that was hate and something, and Duncan and something else.
That's right.
He has his own version of a trinocular view. And
Right.
instead of,
Yeah.
past, present, and future, it's hate, Duncan, and
Who's
whoever he is
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
but it's that Duncan, that compulsion to help his young master. His young master is in need. It's that compulsion that is guiding him more than anything, and that's the Duncan. So yeah, and I always, like I said, it is Duncan's actions. It is his things that is the true fulcrum of everything that is going to happen. Everything's dependent on him awakening, on him
Mm-hmm.
choosing to become something else. So yeah, stay close to me, Duncan. Paul said. I'll need to depend on you for many things. And as Idaho continued to stand entranced, Duncan. Yes, I am Duncan. Of course you are. This was the moment when you came back. We'll go inside now. Idaho fell into step beside Paul. It was like the old times, yet not like them. Now that he stood free of the Talaxu, he could appreciate what they had given him. Zinsuni training permitted him to overcome the shock of events. The Mentat accomplishment formed a counterbalance. He put off all fear, standing above the source. His entire consciousness looked outward from a position of infinite wonder. He had been dead. He was alive. Sire, the Fadikin Tandis said as they approached him. The woman Lickna said she must see you. I told her to wait. Thank you, Paul said. The birth. I spoke to the medics, Tandis said, falling a step. They said you have two children, both of them alive and sound. Two? Paul stumbled, caught himself on Idaho's arm. A boy and a girl, Tandis said. I saw them. They're good fruit babies. How? How did she die? Paul whispered. My lord, Tandis bent close. Chani, Paul said. It was the birth, my lord, Tandis husked. They said her body was drained by the speed of it. I don't understand, but that's what they said.
Mm-hmm.
Take me to her, Paul whispered. My lord, take me to her. That's where we're going, my lord. Again, Tandis bent close to Paul. Why does your gula carry a bar knife? Duncan, put away your knife, Paul said. The time for violence is past. As he spoke, Paul felt closer to the sound of his voice than to the mechanisms which had created the sound. Two babies. The vision had contained but one. If these moments went as the vision went, there was a person here who felt grief and anger. Someone. His own awareness lay in the grip of an awful treadmill, replaying his own life and memory. Two babies. Again he stumbled. Chani, Chani, he thought. There was no other way. Chani, beloved, believe me that this death was quicker for you, and kinder. They had held our children hostage, displayed you in a cage in slave pits, reviled you with the blame for my death. This way we destroy them and save our children. Children. Once more he stumbled. I permitted this, he thought. I should feel guilty. The sound of noise and confusion filled the cavern ahead of them. It grew louder, precisely as he remembered it growing louder. Yes, this was the pattern, the inexorable pattern, even with two children. Shani is dead, he told himself. At some faraway instant in the past which he had shared with others, the future had reached down to him. It had chivied him. Is that the way you say that? Chivied?
Mm-hmm. CHIVY.
Mm-hmm. Chivied him and herded him into a chasm whose walls grew narrower and narrower. He could feel them closing in on him. This was the way the vision went. Chani is dead. I should abandon myself to grief. But that was not the way the vision went. Has Leah been summoned? He asked. She is with Chani's friends, Tanda said. Paul sensed the mob pressing back to give him passage. Their silence moved ahead of him like a wave. The noise and confusion began dying down. A sense of congested emotion filled the siege. He wanted to remove the people from his vision, found it impossible. Every face turned to follow him carried its special imprint. They were pitiless with curiosity, those faces. They felt grief, yes, but he understood the cruelty which drenched them. They were watching the articulate become blind, become dumb, the wise become a fool. The clown always appealed to cruelty. This was more than a death watch, less than a wake. Paul. Paul felt his soul begging for respite, but still the vision moved him. Just a little further now, he told himself. Black, visionless dark awaited him just ahead. There lay the place ripped out of his vision by grief and guilt, the place where the moon fell. He stumbled into it, would have fallen had Idaho not taken his arm in a fierce grip, a solid presence knowing how to share his grief in silence. Here is the place, Tanta said. Watch your steps, sire, Idaho said, helping him over an infant's lip. Hangings brushed Paul's face. Idaho pulled him to a halt. Paul felt the room then, a reflection against his cheeks and ears. It was a rock-walled space with the rock hidden behind tapestries. Where is Chani? Oh, whispered. Rod's voice answered him. He's right here, Russell. Paul heaved a trembling sigh. He had feared her body, already had been removed to the stills where freedom reclaimed the water of the tribe. Was that the way the vision went? He felt abandoned in his blindness. The children? Paul asked. They are here too, my lord, Idaho said. You have beautiful twins, Usohara said. A boy and a girl. See, we have them here in Krish. Two children, Paul thought wonderingly. The vision had contained only a daughter. He cast himself adrift from Idaho's arm, moved toward the place where Hara had spoken, stumbled into a hard surface. His hands explored the matted glass outlines of a Krish. Someone took his left arm. Usum? It was Hara. She guided his hand into the Krish. He felt soft flesh. It was so warm. He felt ribs, breathing. That is your son, Hara whispered. She moved his hand. And this is your daughter. Her hand tightened on his. Usum, are you truly blind now? He knew what she was thinking. The blind must be abandoned in the desert. Freeman tribes carry no dead weight. Take me to Chani, Paul said, ignoring her question. Hara turned him, guided him to the left. Paul felt himself accepting now the fact that Chani was dead. He had taken his place in the universe he did not want, wearing flesh that did not fit. Every breath he drew bruised his emotions. Two children. He wondered if he had committed himself to a passage where his vision would never return. It seemed unimportant. Where is my brother? It was Aaliyah's voice behind him. He heard the rush of her, the overwhelming presence, as she took his arms from Hara. I must speak to you, Aaliyah hissed. In a moment, Paul said. Now it's about Lickna. I know, Paul said. In a moment. You don't have a moment. I have many moments. But Chani doesn't. Be still, he ordered. Chani is dead. He put a hand across her mouth as she started to protest. I order you to be still. He felt her subside.
and removed his hand. Describe what you see, he said. Paul! Frustration and tears battled in her voice. Never mind, he said, and he forced himself to inner stillness, opened the eyes of his vision to this moment. Yes, it was still here. China's body lay on a pallet within a ring of light. Someone had straightened her white robe smoothly, trying to hide the blood from the birth. No matter. He could not turn his awareness from the vision of her face, such a mirror of eternity in the still features. I love that Paul didn't want to see this moment, so he
Right.
closed himself off to it.
Mm-hmm.
He just went in blind. He didn't want to see. But now that Aaliyah's here, and he just needs her to be there, but she
Right.
can't be
Mm-hmm.
because she's caught with grief as well.
Mm-hmm.
So reluctantly, he opens his vision once more, and he tries to take in the whole scene, but all he can see is Chani and that stillness that she's existing in. He can't see anything else.
Right.
His vision won't allow him to see anything else. He turned away, but the vision moved with him. She was gone, never to return. The air, the universe, all vacant, everywhere vacant. Was this the essence of his penance, he wondered? He wanted tears, but they would not come. Had he lived too long a freeman? This death demanded its moisture. Nearby, a baby cried and was hushed. The sound pulled a curtain on his vision. Paul welcomed the darkness. This is another world, he thought. Two children. The thought came out of some lost oracular trance. He tried to recapture the timeless mind dilation of the melange, but awareness fell short. No burst of the future came into this new consciousness. He felt himself rejecting the future. Any future. Goodbye, my Zahaya, he whispered. Aaliyah's voice, harsh and demanding, came from somewhere behind him. I've brought Lichna. Paul turned. That's not Lichna, he said. That's a face dancer. Lichna's dead. Hear what she says. Slowly, Paul moved toward his sister's voice. I'm not surprised to find you alive, Atreides. The voice was like Lichna's, but with subtle differences, as though the speaker used Lichna's vocal cords but no longer bothered to control them sufficiently. Paul found himself struck by an odd note of honesty in the voice. Not surprised? Paul asked. I am Saitel, a Talaxu of the face dancers, and I would know a thing before we bargain. Is that a gula I see behind you? Duncan, Idaho. It's Duncan, Idaho, Paul said, and I will not bargain with you. I think you'll bargain, Saitel said. Duncan, Paul said, speaking over his shoulder, will you kill this Talaxu if I ask it? Yes, my lord. There was the suppressed rage of a berserker in Idaho's voice. Wait, Aaliyah said. You don't know what you're rejecting. But I do know, Paul said.
Mm-hmm.
So it's truly Duncan Idaho the Atreides, Saitel said. We found the lever. A Gula can regain his past. Paul heard footsteps. Someone brushed past him on the left. Saitel's voice came from behind him now. What do you remember of your past, Duncan? Everything. From my childhood on. I remember you at the tank when they removed me from it, Idaho said. Wonderful, Saitel breathed. Wonderful. Paul heard the voice moving. I need a vision, he thought. Darkness frustrated him. Bene Gesserit training warned him of terrifying menace in Saitel, yet the creature remained a voice, a shadow of movement, entirely beyond him. Are these the Atreides babies? Saitel asked. Hurrah, Paul cried. Get her away from there. Stay where you are, Saitel shouted. All of you. I warn you, a face dancer can move faster than you suspect. My knife can have both these lives before you touch me. Paul felt someone touch his right arm, then move off to the right. That's far enough, Aaliyah, Saitel said. Aaliyah, Paul said, don't. It's my fault, Aaliyah groaned. My fault. Atreides, Paul said, shall we bargain now? Behind him, Paul heard a single hoarse curse, his throat constricted at the suppressed violence. Idaho's voice. Idaho must not break. Saitel will kill the babies. To strike a bargain, one requires a thing to sell, Saitel said. Not so, Atreides. Will you have your Chani back? We can restore her to you. A Gula, Atreides. A Gula with full memory. But we must hurry. Call your friends to bring a cryologic tank to preserve the flesh. To hear Chani's voice once more, Paul thought. To hear her presence beside me. That's why they gave me Idaho as a Gula. To let me discover how much the recreation is like the original. But now, full restoration. At that price, I'd be a Talaxu too forevermore. And Chani, chained to the same fate by a threat to our children, exposed once more to the Quizerat's plotting. What pressures would you use to restore China's memory to her? Paul asked, fighting to keep the voice calm. Would you condition her to kill one of her own children? We use whatever pressures we need, Saitel said. What say you, Atreides? Aaliyah, Paul said, bargain with this thing. I cannot bargain with what I cannot see. A wise choice, Saitel gloated. Well, Aaliyah, who do you offer me as your brother's agent? Paul lowered his head, bringing himself to stillness within stillness. He'd glimpsed something just then, like a vision, but not a vision. It had been a knife close to him. There! Give me a moment to think, Aaliyah said. My knife is patient, Saitel said, but Chinese flesh is not. Take a reasonable amount of time. Paul felt himself blinking. It could not be, but it was. He felt eyes. The vantage point was odd, and they moved in an erratic way. There! The knife swam into his vision. With a breath-stealing shock, Paul recognized the viewpoint. It was that one of his children. He was seeing Saitel's knife's hand from within the creche. It glittered only inches from him. Yes, and he could see himself across the room as well, head down, standing quietly, a figure of no menace, ignored by the others in the room. To begin, you might assign us all your chum holdings, Saitel suggested. All of them? Aaliyah protested. All. Watching himself through the eyes in the creche, Paul slipped his clasp knife from its belt sheath. The movement produced a strange sensation of duality. He measured the distance, the angle. There'd be no second chance. He prepared his body then in the Bene Gesserit way, armed himself like a cocked spring for a single concentrated movement, a prana thing, requiring all his muscles balanced in one exquisite unity. The clasp knife leaped from his hand. The milky blur of it flashed into Saitel's right eye, jerked the face dancer's head back. Saitel threw both hands up and staggered backward against the wall.
Yep.
His knife clattered off the ceiling to hit the floor. Saitel rebounded from the wall. He fell face forward, head before he touched the floor. Dead before he touched the floor.
That knife dangerous.
One swift movement.
Yep.
I love that he used the Bene Gesserit type thing, because all the Bene Gesserits look weaker and frailer than they usually are. But him, he's blind and crumpled in the corner, not being paid attention to at all. He used that to his advantage. His throw, like in one is full synchronicity with the entire universe itself.
Right.
Like in just a perfect synchronous moment. All of his muscles, all of his thoughts, everything unified.
For that
one throw of the knife to save his children. Like in the most, that's what he's been doing the entire time.
Yeah.
But this is the most literal version of it. To literally save the future. He does this and he gets him.
Yeah.
He gets him good. Like it was right in the eye.
Right in the eye.
His head jerks back. He throws his knife.
Right.
He's dead before he even hits the ground.
Yep.
In a flash of movement.
Good.
Yeah, good one. Still, through the eyes of the creature, Paul watched the faces in the room turn toward his eyeless figure, read the combined shot.
Right.
Then Aaliyah rushed to the creature, bent over it, and hid the view from him.
Right.
Oh, they're safe, Aaliyah said. They're safe. My lord, Idaho whispered. Was that part of your vision? No.
Nope.
He waved the hand in Idaho's direction. Let it be. Forgive me, Paul, Aaliyah said. But when that creature said they could revive, there are some prices an Atreides cannot pay, Paul said. You know that. I know, she sighed, but I was tempted. Who was not tempted? Paul asked. He turned away from them, groped his way to a wall, leaned against it, and tried to understand what he had done. How? How? The eyes in the creature? He felt poised on the brink of terrifying revelation. My eyes, Father. The words shaping shimmered before his sightless vision. My son, Paul whispered, too low for any to hear. You're aware? Yes, Father. Look. Paul sagged against the wall in a spasm of dizziness. He felt that he had been upended and drained. His own life whipped past him. He saw his father. He was his father. And the grandfather and the grandfathers before that. His awareness tumbled through a mind-shattering corridor of his whole male line. How? He excitedly. Faint word shapings appeared, faded, and were gone, as though the strain was too great. Paul wiped saliva from the corner of his mouth. He remembered the awakening of Aaliyah in the Lady Jessica's room. But there had been no water of life, no overdose of melange this time. Or had there? Had Chinese hunger been for that? Or was this somehow the genetic product of his line, foreseen by the Reverend Mother Gaia Mahane? Paul felt himself in the creech then, with Aaliyah cooing over him. Her hands soothed him. Her face loomed, a giant thing directly over him. She turned him then, and saw his creech companion, a girl with that bony, ribbed look of strength which came from a desert heritage. She had a full head of tawny red hair. As he stared, she opened her eyes. Those eyes! China peered out of her eyes, and the Lady Jessica. A multitude peered out of those eyes. Look at that, Aaliyah said. They're staring at each other. Babies can't focus at that age, Hara said. I
I
could,
did. Yeah.
Aaliyah said. Slowly, Paul felt himself being disengaged from that endless awareness. He was back at his own wailing wall, then leaning against it. Idaho shook his shoulder gently. My lord, let my son be called Leto for his father, Paul said, straightening. For my father.
Mm-hmm.
At the time of naming, Hara said, I will stand beside you as a friend of the mother and give that name. And my daughter, Paul said, let her be called Ganima. Uso, Hara objected. Ganima's an ill omen name. It saved your life, Paul said. What matter that Aaliyah made fun of you with that name? My daughter is Ganima, a spoil of war.
Mm-hmm.
Paul heard wheels squeak behind him then. The paddle with Chinese body being moved, the chant of the water right began. Hal Yawam, Hara said. I must leave now if I am to be observer of the holy truth and stand beside my friend for the last time. Her water belongs to the tribe. The water belongs to the tribe, Paul murmured. He heard Hurrah leave. He groped outwards and found Idaho's sleeve. Take me to my quarters, Duncan. Inside his quarters, he shook himself free, gently. It was a time to be alone. Before Idaho could leave, there was disturbance at the door. Master! It was B-Jazz, calling from the door. Duncan, Paul said, let him come 2 paces forward. Kill him if he comes further.
That's right.
Aye, Idaho said. Duncan is it, B-Jazz said. Is it truly Duncan, Idaho? It is, Idaho said. I remember. Then Scythel's plan succeeded. Scythel is dead, Paul said. But I am not, and the plan is not, B-Jazz said. By the tank in which I grew, it can be done. I shall have my pass. All of them. It needs only the right trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Trigger? Paul asked. The compulsion to kill you, Idaho said. Rage thick in its voice. Mint-tech computation. They found that I thought of you as the son I never had. Rather than slay you, the true Duncan Idaho would take over the Gula body. But it might have failed. Tell me, dwarf, if your plan had failed, if I'd killed him, what then? Oh, and we'd have bargained with the sister to have the brother. But this way, the bargaining is better. Paul took a shuddering breath. He could hear the mourners moving down the last passage now toward the deep rooms and the water stills. It's not too late, my lord, B.J. said. Will you have your love back? We can restore her to you. Agula, yes. But now we can hold out the full restoration. Shall we summon servants with a cryological tank? Preserve the flesh of your beloved? It was harder now, Paul found. He had exhausted his powers in the first highlight of temptation, and now all that was for nothing to feel China's presence once more. Silence him, Paul told Idaho, speaking in the trader's battle tongue. He heard Idaho move toward the door. Master, Bijay squeaked. As you love me, Paul said, still in the battle tongue, do me this favor. Kill him before I succumb. No! Bijay screamed. The sound stopped abruptly with a frightened grunt. I did him the kindness, Idaho said. Paid him back with that kindness, huh?
Yep.
Paul bent his head, listening. He no longer could hear the mourners. He thought of the ancient female rite being performed now deep in the siege, far down in the room of the death still, where the tribe would cover its water. There was no choice, Paul said. You understand that, Duncan? I understand. There are some things no one can bear. I meddled in all the possible futures. I could create until finally they created me. My lord, you shouldn't. There are problems in this universe for which there are no answers, Paul said. Nothing can be done. As he spoke, Paul felt his link with the vision shatter.
Mm-hmm.
His mind cowered. overwhelmed by infinite possibilities. His lost vision became like the wind, blowing where it willed.
Mm-hmm.
We are free.
Yes.
Once again, there
Mm-hmm.
are problems in the universe that nothing can be done, that we can do nothing about,
Right.
and we should do nothing about,
Mm-hmm.
because it's those knots, those limits that breed our infinite possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And we are freed once more. You know, everything was Paul's vision at once.
Mm-hmm.
At that time,
Right.
there was no infinite
Right.
possibilities. It was just Paul and what he saw. But he had succeeded. His vision shattered, and once again, infinite possibilities rolled in.
Mm-hmm.
He freed us, and it cost him everything.
That's right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
this is that. Like I said, everything after this is just an epilogue. But
Yeah.
there is one more chapter,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a few quotes in there, right? Yeah. How long is one yet?
Yeah.
How
It's
long is
been,
one in a while?
yeah. Yeah. It's been a minute. Uh-huh.
So yeah, we say Muad'Dib. We say of Muad'Dib that he was gone on a journey into that land where we walked without footprints.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, now at this point, Paul has decided to walk off into the desert,
Right.
since now he is truly blind.
Mm-hmm.
And Duncan is having a hard time accepting this.
Yes.
He wants to go in the desert to go get him. He wants
Right.
to save him, but he knows that
Mm-hmm. Do
he
not
can't.
send any ornithopters, nothing. Just
Nothing's out there.
nope.
Nobody.
Nobody's
And
going
for,
up there.
and for the freemen, they accept that.
Right.
That's a part of their culture.
Right.
But Duncan is like,
Right. That's right.
Let's go get him. Let's
Right.
find him. You know. And let me see. Page was this on? Yeah, and I love that because he says right here, because Tandis was the deacon that accompanied Paul on his final trip.
Right.
And he says and Tandis is the one talking to Duncan about all the things that Paul has said,
Right.
right? And he said words intruded on his memory, the ritual words of the Fidika lieutenant posting a guard over Muad'Dib's children. It shall be the solemn duty of the officers in charge. The plotting, self-important language of government and
Right.
nation. It has seduced the freemen. It has seduced everyone.
Mm-hmm.
A great man was dying out there, but language plotted on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where it's like the universe doesn't care. It's like you're having a real bad day and
Right.
Walking on Sunshine comes on the radio.
Yep. Yep.
Life moves on.
Yeah.
It keeps going. It keeps moving on, and and
Yeah. It
and
doesn't
for
stop.
one moment,
Right.
for this moment,
Mhm.
relish in the fact that it's no longer about Paul.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't have happened before, but
Right.
now
But now, yeah.
it is. Be thankful for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, let me see, one more part.
Right. When
One
he
more
goes
part.
out into the sunset.
Mhm.
Out of
When
here.
she had said, she commanded the execution of the traitors.
Right.
All of them.
All of them.
Mhm.
Everybody gets it. He
And I
still
love
goes
that,
like, I'm happy to oblige, right?
The Beni Dialects and the Guild had overplayed their hands and had lost, were discredited. The Quizzerat was shaken by the treason of Corba and others high within it, and Paul's final voluntary act, his ultimate acceptance of their customs, had ensured the loyalty of the freemen to him and to his house. He was one of them forever now.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. Just absolute total victory for
Right.
Paul. He whooped everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it, and it cost him everything. But
Mhm.
this is a true victory. This is a real life victory.
Right.
The beginning of the jihad, the ascendance of his house, that was tragic.
Right.
That was the start of a genocide that
Mhm.
killed billions of people. But now it is finally over, and he ended it.
Mhm.
He saved the future. He saved his children. He beat all those tinkering for utopia.
Right.
He beat them all.
Right.
And now,
All y'all are conspiracies.
Mhm.
Gone.
and here we go. And I think that I love that there's this little part right here. It says, Idaho stared again into the desert, feeling himself become whole. one person capable of seeing the pattern of what Paul had created. Judgment strategy, the traders called it in their training manuals. People are subordinate to government, but the ruled always influence the rulers. Did the ruled have any concept he wanted of what they had helped create here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we all been
Right.
to what the government rules us all,
Mm-hmm.
but people always influence other people.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing exists in the vacuum.
That's right.
And even though you may not be able to admit to yourself the role that you have played in this,
Mm-hmm.
but you have played it nonetheless.
Yep. Yeah, your admitting to it is not even necessary. Honestly, to be
Yeah.
quite honest, it's not even necessary because it's done.
And I love this little part too, where Aaliyah is talking about Irulan
Yes.
because she's executed everybody,
Right. Right.
but she
She
had to
left.
kill
Yeah.
Irulan
Right.
because Irulan she like let me see. Let me see.
Is she gonna be like watching over the children, or
Yeah.
yeah?
It said, I must. It said, do you know what I must do for him? I must save the life of the Princess Irulan. That one. You should hear her grief. Wailing, giving
Right.
voice to the dead. She swears she loved him and knew it not. She reviles her sisterhood. Says she'll spend her life teaching Paul's children. You trust her? She reeks of trustworthiness.
That's right. Yep.
And I love that. And
Mm-hmm.
Irulan has renounced all connections to the sisterhood.
Right.
And it's like
Yeah, she's
like
yeah.
I love Paul
Mm-hmm.
in our own way, and
Mhm.
I'm not no longer will betray
Mm-hmm.
any of them, even though she played a part in the
Yeah.
conspiracy. She like
Yeah,
she
you don't have to
renounced
worry about
all-
her.
You ain't got to worry about
yeah,
her.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and I just love, and that's that's something else that we see, but that's later on. That's with his son
Right.
about how his son deals with his enemies.
Oh
They
well,
all
yeah.
like
Yeah, well,
his enemies always end up becoming his greatest allies.
yeah.
And you see that at play here with Irulan.
Uh-huh.
Say she reeks with trustworthiness. It's
Don't
like
worry about her. Yeah,
Aaliyah is so disgusting.
yeah.
Like I want to kill her
Yeah.
because if it wasn't with the contraceptives, then Johnny wouldn't be dead.
Mm-hmm.
He's like I want to execute her, but that's the price.
Yep.
He said he wants me to save her life, and I spared her, and then she's all crying.
Yeah, she
I loved him. I loved you the whole time. And like,
Shut up.
like, oh man, but she's trustworthy, and with that, the Reverend Mothers no longer have no control over what's going to happen with these children.
That's right.
Not even the Bene Gesserit can touch them now.
Yep.
Like I said, complete and total.
Yeah, she
victory.
is. Yeah, it's solid now. Right.
It's a done deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends with Duncan comforting Aaliyah in the what's it called? Place of safety.
Right.
And that's how it ends.
Right.
And thus ends
our that's 5-week read of
I think this would be 6 episodes.
Yeah, 6 whatever.
So
yeah.
I was 6-week discussion of Dune Messiah.
Yes, it's been invigorating for me because like I said, when I first, read it again for the second time, at where I was so angry and so distraught.
Mm-hmm.
To be quite honest, I'm like, I forgot now what I really was upset about. Like, but at that time I was so angry, so frustrated. I'm like, I need to sort of recalibrate in some type of way. And
that's Dune Messiah.
Right.
If, like I said, the first Dune was a tragedy costing victory, this is a victory costing tragedy.
Right.
It was Paul just lamenting the sacrifice he's going to have to make, but knowing that he's going to make it. And all the little things that he does. And I mean, all of this takes place over like a couple months.
Yeah.
This story, like the first Dune took place over years.
Right.
But this took place.
Yeah, it didn't take. Yeah, it's months. Pretty much.
And I love it. There were no big battles. No sword fights. No. It was just extremely melodramatic. Very operatic.
Yeah. Just think about like the span of pregnancy, I guess.
Yeah.
That's
even that happened.
Yeah.
Fast. There was a sense of urgency even in that.
Right.
Everything was moving, and Paul's choice here. I remember the first time I read. I always get misty eyed by the
Hmm.
end of it. But Paul's sacrifice didn't affect me as much as Leto's sacrifice that comes later on. Now that
Yeah.
one broke me. I
Well,
I,
yeah.
I
Well,
love
I remember
Paul.
when I first
Yeah,
read it, I was like, "Wait, what?"
yeah.
It was
I
one of
said I
those.
love Paul, but what his son ends up
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. His
His son
son
is
is a
something
whole.
else.
He's a whole.
So
Look.
maybe we'll read that at some point.
Yeah.
But
Maybe some other frustration to come
and we
along.
just have to wait. Just have to
Yeah.
wait.
That's right.
The world provides.
That's right.
You know,
Yes, it does.
nature upholds preaches.
That's it.
So it's gonna
That's
come.
right. Yeah. Just wait.
So yeah, we just wait for it. But yeah,
Yes.
that was Dune Messiah,
Uh
and
huh.
hopefully you all were able to gain a bit of strength, your own
Hmm.
victory
Right.
through Paul's tragedy here. And like we said, that's the fallacy of leadership.
Leadership. Hmm.
That's the cost. When everything relies on the actions of a few individuals of one person,
Hmm.
that's the price that we all pay. You know, they try relentlessly to give it back. And sometimes they succeed.
Hmm.
But even then, you may not even recognize what they gave you because you're still looking
Yeah.
for another leader.
Hmm.
If you want to worship anything, I think the ultimate lesson of Dune Messiah
Hmm.
is if you want to worship anything,
Worship
worship
life.
life.
Right.
So if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments and thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you. See you next year.